Hey there gardeners, Chris here at Gardensteading. I wanted to talk about my Tamarillo, which is a tree tomato kind of thing. Normally they have a red or perhaps yellow fruit. Very tangy kind of fruit, really unusual, really cool thing, expensive to buy, much better to grow if you can. I'm in the subtropics, which is why I've planted this one here. It has had some issues with aphids, and there's actually some on it now. There's actually some ants on it now as well. But the bigger problem we've had, which is why it's looking really bad here, it's got these really light green, almost yellowy leaves. It's drooping, it's not looking good at all. It's because it's got too much water. And I would have expected it probably would have had a little bit of resistance to being sodden, mainly because I think these are a bit more of a tropical plant. However, that is not the case. And in fact, I saw a video by Self-Sufficient Me where he has very sodden conditions in Queensland. And he said, put these in a big raised bed. And I've got a second one that I put in a raised bed for that very reason before this big issue happened. And the issue I'm talking about, I don't know if you can hear that, but the ground underneath this plant is absolutely sodden. It's a little bit clayey as well. We're on a hill here. We got a very rocky ground. It's kind of sandy, but also kind of clayey, which means that generally the drainage has been good. We've had 500 mil of rain, which for reference is a third of a year's worth of rain. A normal monthly amount is about 100 mil. We had that in 5 days. So everything has been swamped. And this plant is the one that's suffering the most. Now, as far as what we can do, obviously, always, you can plant it on a bit of a mound, which is what I've done with a lot of the other plants that I've put in since we've moved in. This one's been in for quite a while. It has really been affected by pests and now by the sodden ground. It is drowning, and I've tried to fix that. And I'm gonna show you what I did to try and fix it. Okay, so hopefully you can see around me, I've got kind of this bit of a moat around the plant itself. Now, when it was pouring with rain, when we'd really only had kind of half of that huge downpour, I basically came out with my, not my pickaxe, the name of it's totally gone off my mind, but I dug this trench. And so I've got a trench that runs from the top here, because what happened is because there was a bit of an indent around where the plant has been planted, that was just full of water. And I think the clayey kind of aspect of the soil was very much just retaining all that water. So I've run a trench all the way down and around, almost down to a bit of a driveway down there. And on the other side, I've done the same kind of thing. Now, that did move a whole heap of water from around the plant, and there was almost like a river running at times. The problem is there's still a heap of water coming down the hill, and this is probably going to be sodden for quite a while just because of the sheer amount of water that has been left in this location. This is really annoying. I was really hoping that this plant here in the fruit forest would do quite well, and I don't think it's too much of an issue. I think probably what I needed to do was I needed to mound it up. And I didn't need to mound it up as far as our avocados, which I'll show you in a second, but I just needed to have it elevated enough that part of the roots were above that sodden ground so that no matter what happened, the plant was getting a bit more aeration and a little bit more of kind of that airy soil, rather than just sitting basically in a hole full of water where it couldn't drain, and then as a result, the plant was essentially just drowning. So let's have a look at the avocados and I'll give you an idea of kind of the extreme end of mounding, and then we'll have a look at my other Tamarillo, which is doing much better. When we're talking about mounding, I was actually told because in the area it does get fairly wet at times, you want to mound your avocados. And no doubt, even being on a hill and doing a drainage test and finding the water drainage was generally quite good. Again, because it's like a little bit clayey, a little bit sandy, it's like a weird combination of the two. It was really important that with our avocados, because if they get wet feet, they're just going to die, that we mound them right up. And it's actually probably a little bit hard to see how big of a mound this is because it's been overgrown by the grass. I've done a really poor job in kind of keeping the plant excluded so it can just grow really well. However, the mound was probably this tall to start off with. And obviously we're on a hill here, so you know, it's not quite as tall at the back of the hill, and then it does just continue into the natural slope of the hill. But this avocado here was actually quite significantly mounded up. Now, I don't know that a Tamarillo would really need that level of mounding. However, while my avocado is not looking really that good right at this moment, it's got a lot of new shoots on it, which it looks like it's going to explode into growth. I need to protect it through winter. just in case we have any frosts. I think I'm in about zone 10B, so it's quite subtropical here. It shouldn't get freezing cold. We're in a little bit of a protected spot as well, as far as like a microclimate, but we haven't been here long enough to really figure that out. And that's why the Tamarillo issue happened. We didn't know how things were gonna react. And while a lot of the ground does actually drain quite well, fairly quickly, just that level of downpour and also the holes we've actually dug for the plants is what is causing some of these issues. Anyway, so as you can see here, nice big mound. This is a bigger mound than I would do for the Tamarillo. With some of the apples and some of the other things we've put in, and I'll show you a citrus because that's probably a better thing to compare it against. Just that bit of mounding makes a big difference, and I think you get a nice compromise between some of the roots being able to obviously have a good amount of air, but also being able to get out and get some moisture as well into the deeper ground. And what do we have here? This is actually, and I don't know if you can see it, a Buddha's hand citrus. And so this is less of an eating citrus and a little bit more, apparently it's used in fragrances and things like that. So quite an interesting little addition to the garden. And so what I've done here, and actually, this is quite interesting and I'll show you it close up, quite a lot of the soil has actually been washed away behind that plant. So I am gonna need to top that off. We've got some mulch in there at the moment, which is kind of keeping it fairly decent. Here, what I've done is I've really got the plant, you know, kind of this far off the back level, but because it's on a hill, we've got this big kind of extended mound downhill from it, which helps capture water. But this section here is actually quite raised out of the ground, which should help the plant roots breathe. I don't know how big of an issue it is for a citrus, but again, when I put this in was when we were having the heavy rain and I just didn't want it to drown. So I did have to make some compromises where with a citrus, I'm not sure how important that is. But this is what I need to do for my Tamarillos if I'm to plant them in the ground like this in the future. And this has got buds on it. It's looking actually really good since it's gone in only a week ago, which considering the level of rain, we'd know if it was unhappy already and if it was being flooded out. So this is a good result. This is what I've done with a lot of the plants, and this is what I should have done with that Tamarillo. So what do we have here? We have my slightly more successful Tamarillo. There is still a little bit of leaf damage here, but this one was only recently put in the last month. And as you can see, the leaves are what we want to see. They're a much darker color. We are still seeing a little bit of aphid damage, which I am going to need to keep an eye on, because contrary to kind of some of the online advice where I've heard people say, you just wait for these little miniature wasps to come and clear off your aphids, because I don't think I've got the ecosystem built up to the extent and I haven't had the garden in for long enough, that's not happening. And just trying to leave the plants, it doesn't work. However, Self-Sufficient Me recommended for his conditions to have a Tamarillo in a raised bed. And that's what I've done here. The bottom of this bed is Hugo culture. In the back, we have some blueberries. And I do believe that while they like a more acidic soil than the Tamarillo, it does kind of err in that direction. And then we've got a grape down the other end, which I think may have died, but you win some, you lose some. So this Tamarillo doing very well compared to our other one. Obviously this has insane drainage. The Hugo culture in the bottom of the bed will hold some moisture, but the roots won't be swamped. And as a result, this is at the moment quite a success, where the other Tamarillo, obviously by mistakes made by me, is suffering. And hopefully it's gonna get through that, but we're gonna have to wait and see on that one. And these only last 5 to 6 years, so you do need to keep planting them. So if you've got one in that's like 3 years old, you probably wanna put another one in and keep them cycling to make sure you don't end up in a situation where they've died off and you're getting no fruit. Because the fruit is kind of normally on the pricey side. It's not something that you'd probably wanna be buying lots of, but if you're growing it yourself, that's awesome.